Well, now until Veterans Day, News Channel 34 is bringing you the real-life stories of those who have served our country from across the nation. Tonight, a Navy pilot who lives in Virginia takes us on a trip back in time where two superpowers flexed their nuclear muscles as the world held its breath. As Tom Shad shows us, his close encounter with the enemy later led him to appreciate the phrase, "go with the flow."
Veterans Voices on News Channel 34 is sponsored by M&T Bank, Senator Fred Ekshar, and UHS.
Leonardo da Vinci called water the driving force of nature. But its stillness can also calm a restless soul, maybe even save one. Hold that thought as we meet retired Rear Admiral Jake Tobin, or as he prefers,
just Jake,
and his recollection as a young Navy pilot in October 1962, the chilliest hours of the Cold War.
Things were always interesting at that time.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba.
President Kennedy was very concerned about the missiles that were going in down there.
We know it as the Cuban Missile Crisis, and Jake Tobin was stationed on that island at Guantanamo Bay.
There is the P-5M.
Okay, that's what you were flying.
Yes.
Tobin was co-piloting an unarmed seaplane for a surveillance mission over water.
We were just part of the surveillance to make sure we knew who was coming, who was going, and what was leaving. And we took off, and we were observing some area just on the western side of Cuba, and we got a little too close to land.
And that's when a Soviet fighter jet took notice.
Here came this Cuban MiG, come screaming at us. Full bore, came right up next to us, turned around, came back in, and had us targeted, and I think fired.
Their P-5M Marlin could not return fire.
The only thing that we could do was head for the water. We get in that ground effect, and we could fly forever, 15 feet, no problem.
And that is how Jake Tobin fell in love with the water. Because during those heart-stopping moments, his seaplane could go where a MiG fighter could not.
Thank you, God. We were most grateful.
Following tense negotiations, the Soviets agreed to pull their missiles from Cuba. Tobin retired as a Rear Admiral, but is still surrounded by water.
It began to have more of a spiritual effect for me.
Leaving time to reflect.
In your career as a naval officer and a pilot?
I know if I had to do it all over again, the good and the bad, I would.
Including that day, 56 years ago, when we counted down to a nuclear war that did not happen, and a future Rear Admiral we know as
Just Jake
was saved by the water.
Cheers.
I'm Tom Shad reporting.